Department of Applied Mechanics, MNNIT Allahabad. Ma'am, I request you to conduct this session.
I don't know, Professor Mathur, how much time we have for this session. Half an hour, 45 minutes, 45 minutes. So if it is 45 minutes, then we'll divide it like that. Dr. Ganguly, how much time you think you will have? Half an hour? So I will try to restrict half an hour time, and then you have enough time, 15 minutes for interaction. And maybe you have to bear with me for another 2 or 3 minutes time. Of his consulting firm Vision IPR, offering services in management of intellectual property rights, information security and knowledge management. He is a leading international expert in IPR and consultant to the World Intellectual Property Organization, that is WIPO, for IPR capability building programs in developing countries. And elected fellow of the Maharashtra Academy of Science, Dr. Ganguly is also scientific consultant to the Innovation in IPR Matters, the Office of the Principal Scientific Advisor, Government of India, and a member of the advisory board of the IIPI, Washington. As a former member of the Board of Governors of the National Institute of Fashion Technology, NIFT, Ministry of Textile, Government of India, and presently a member of the Senate of NIFT, he has spearheaded the inclusion of IPR in creative arts and technology education in India. He was invited by the government of South Africa to advise and draft their law related to IPR. He was also invited by the Royal Jordanian Scientific Society to advise and draft their national policy on IPR. He is a member of the International Editorial Board of World Patent Information, an Austria journal. His lecture is titled Bioprospecting, Biopiracy and IPR, Interfacing the Gaps. And you will agree, after hearing to his profile, that we perhaps would not happen to have anybody else better to hear in this area. So I request Dr. Ganguly. Dr. Ganguly, please.
This was one place which I've never visited, and the dream has come true. I don't think, you don't visit Allahabad, you haven't visited the real intelligence and intelligentsia in the country. So we're very pleased, both me and my wife, to be here. What I'll try and do is in about half an hour, take you through some of the nuances in this particular field, where does one stand, and what the issues are. So I'll try and walk you through very quickly, and then probably have a few questions and answers on that. First, sustainable development. There are a lot of questions which are asked. And one of them is very important. Who's sustainable development? Very important. We have to identify for whom, etc. And most important is that, is it a natural evolutionary process or can it be directed? That's number one. And number two, whatever it may be, whichever path you may choose, there is absolutely no substitute for innovation. You have to be a continuous process. That's number one. And number two, for the very same thing, why are we talking of not just development, but sustainable development? And the whole word sustainable development, as you will see, to ensure protection of world's environment and yet meet the needs of the present generation, while safeguarding natural resources for future generations. Very, very important. And therefore the question is that when you utilize natural resources today, in any form, question is, have we thought about the future? Therefore, very important that in any process of development, you're not only creating, but that creation leads to wealth generation. And very importantly, simply generating wealth is not good enough, you have to realize the wealth. And when I use the word wealth, it's not just money. I'm using wealth in a very generic sense of the term out there.
And so when you then come to this whole world of innovation, generally as scientists would normally think about, or technologists, people think about innovations in terms of technology. But innovations are all around, whether these are in technical improvements related to functionality, products, devices, etc., which we are all aware of. But also when we write poetry, or when we sing, or when we dance, or when we sculpture, we have different forms of expressions. So we do create expressions. For example, out here, as you will see that there are expressions, we create shapes and ornamentations, we create all sorts of things. The question is that when you take this broader aspects of innovation, that you create these things and then apply them for human life. That's very important, that we take a much broader view of innovation. But then I come to this very important question of what I call as the difference between what I call as knowledge prospecting versus knowledge piracy. The question is, why does something get classed as prospecting, and when does something get classed as piracy? The important part there is, that's where the fundamental thing comes in, that when you use my knowledge with my consent, you're prospecting my knowledge. When you're using my knowledge without my consent, you're pirating my knowledge. And consent does not necessarily mean to come and take permission. Okay? So it's very important. And when you translate this into bio, simply remove the word knowledge, bio-prospecting versus bio-piracy, it's again the same thing. Are you going to use it with my consent, or are you going to use it without my consent? Very important. And in this area of consent comes in a whole bunch of transactions which are hidden in that word consent. And this is where the difference between standard type of sharing of knowledge versus this type of sharing of knowledge is what is the ownership of knowledge. What determines ownership? Who gives you this particular thing, this word called owner? How do you become an owner? For example, when I say this is my nose, who said this is my nose? Just because my parents told me? Just because this is on my body? So the question comes in, what is this paradigm of ownership? Very important. We seldom question this word ownership. We take it for granted. Similarly, we take the word right for granted. And these are very important issues in today's world when we try to work out what are the various dimensionalities of and the dynamics of ownership, the dynamics of right, etc. And it is in this context, because the world is continuously evolving with its knowledge and utilizing its knowledge, this area is becoming of such great importance, of knowledge ownership and knowledge sharing. That's very important. And therefore, I would like to go to the next part, which is, I may allow you to use my knowledge. So I'm giving you access to my knowledge. But at what price? Very important. So it's not just accessibility, but it's accessibility with affordability. Because if I make it exceptionally high in cost, a cost taken is not just money, it could be many other things that have to cost. So if I raise that bar, accessibility becomes meaningless. So it's a balance that I have to create between accessibility and affordability. Again, the word affordability was understand when I use these particular terms, they're being used in a very generic sense of the term, not just in terms of dollars or rupees, but affordability in its larger dimensions. Now, when you go across, and therefore I define something called minds go to market. It's being used in a pun. As you can see, minds go to market. The question is, who will market the mind? We develop a lot of technology, we develop a lot of things, but who will take it to the market? And who will mind the market? Very important. And why? Because they're saying, how will societal interests be taken care of? Because if societal interests are not taken care of, then why are we useful? And you will see why I am laying the foundations in the background to the main theme that will come in shortly. And therefore I designed a term a few years ago called politics, the politics of knowledge. Therefore the world is moving significantly and very fast into a new dimension of politics. And this politics is not about land or other matter, but the politics of knowledge. And therefore I coined this term called politics. You'll see a little art there. That's a trademark. So I protected it with intellectual property. It's my trademark. And therefore when anybody uses this term, has to recognize that this is a term that was created by me some time ago. Very important. But the important part is that this is, as I said, emerging socio-political dimensions of knowledge trade. And what are we doing? The difference between transacting knowledge and transacting owned knowledge. That's a big difference. If we transact knowledge versus knowledge that is owned. And therefore the whole politics around the world today, all the dimensionalities that are being conducted globally, the entire global economy is really dependent on this knowledge politics. We'll come in to see how this plays a very important role in there. And therefore at this stage I'm reminded of Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore's famous poem, which many of us are very familiar with. I recited this poem when I was delivering a lecture at the WTO. I told them, this was in 2001 when I was lecturing there. And I said, look, 100 years ago, the poet laureate had thought about an undivided world. Very important. Where the mind is without fear and the head is held up, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken into fragments by narrow domestic bones, when words come from the depth of truth, where tireless striving stretches its arms towards perfection, where clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the sand of dead atoms, where the mind is led forward by deep labor for an action, into the heaven of freedom, my fatherland, my country away. This is the concept of knowledge sharing that Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore had. Mind you, when he said when knowledge is free, he probably did not mean free means free of cost. When knowledge was freely distributed, in a sense, it was available at an affordable cost. Very important on that. And of course, when you use the word free, and you see the rest of the terms there, a lot of things about prospecting and piracy are all built into this poem very strongly, so many, more than 100 years ago. And therefore, in this field of intellectual property rights, what do you do? First, there are creations. And when we say intellectual creations, it says creations of the human mind. So you take the creations of the human mind, you take ownership to those particular creations. Because you take ownership to those creations, you get certain rights to it. And what you do is when you transact this knowledge or these creations, you transact certain things vis-a-vis those rights. That's all about intellectual property rights, frankly. Now the important part here is the following. That when you look at this term called intellectual property rights, now I have to put it, saying perception of IPR, similar to 4 blind men who encountered an elephant and reported. And you see what they reported. And that's why all the controversies that start. Somebody touched this part of the elephant and was asked to say, what does the elephant look like? First, the elephant looks like a snake. Right? It felt it so. Right? Then another person, either blind or blindfolded, came and said, touch the feet. And said, elephant is like a pillar. And then somebody looked the body and said, elephant is a wall. Somebody touched the tail and said, elephant is like a rope. IPR and this field is very similar to this. Depends which part you have touched. The question is, have you looked at it as a whole, or are you looking at it as parts? And very interestingly now, summation of parts does not make a whole. Very interesting. Summation of parts does not make a whole. Why? It depends on how you connect the parts. Therefore, simply, if you had 4 legs and a body and a tail and a trunk, etc., and simply add, it won't give you an elephant. It depends on how you attach them. So you need to look at the entire thing as a whole. Therefore, when you look at this subject of IPR, and you look at this subject of when I've come to the biopiracy, all this prospecting, etc., you must look at the subject holistically and not just in parts. Because you may misinterpret when you look at it in parts. And just jump there. And therefore, very important for us to look at, and I call it the shifting paradigms or IPR paradigms. Why? Because when this concept, this Western concept of intellectual property rights, formal concept of intellectual property rights got evolved, it did not start as intellectual property rights. It started as industrial property rights. It was about tangible objects that you created. You created a car, you created a wheel, you created something, and then you said, I created it, therefore I invented, therefore it must be my property, therefore it is mine. Whereas, when slowly, so you created legal frameworks for the inanimate, the wood, etc., the inanimate, but tangible creations of the human mind. But you want to protect, you have created it. So the whole intellectual legal framework said, we will use the same law, do a bit of minor adjustments, and now we will bring it to it. How to protect these intangible creations. Because human mind started doing these intangible creations. That came into the picture. Then came in this fantastic thing in the mid-70s, where, in fact, I was with this gentleman just 2 days back, one of the world's greatest biotechnologists, Professor Ananda Chakravarti. Professor Ananda Chakravarti made a startling invention in the mid-70s. What was it? He created the world's first micro, man-made micro. He created the man-made micro, and that micro he engineered in such a way that it could metabolize certain components of oil, and they filed a patent in the US. The US law at that point in time had a big part in the law. What was it? Life forms are not patentable. Right? They took this particular matter to the US courts. It went to the US Supreme Court, and the very famous judgment to this day called Diamond versus Chakravarti. Diamond was the Commissioner of Patents, and this called Diamond versus Chakravarti. In fact, I was having dinner with him just day before yesterday in Bombay. He's just visiting India at the moment. And what happened after Diamond versus Chakravarti? That the US Supreme Court looked at this matter and said, look, it's a fantastic invention. Life form, so what? He should be given a patent. And that changed the face of humankind around the famous judgment that came from the US Supreme Court in 1980, as recent as 1980. And what happened? The entire industry of biotechnology was born. And today we are standing here, basically, and the GPT, etc., are all because of that one judgment where people started investing, saying, our investments will not go waste, it will be protected, therefore when I invest, I'll be able to create industry, I'll create money, etc. So, further extension to tangible, animate objects such as life forms. Then came in the next one, very important, and that's why we are having this conference. So the same framework is being extended to the protection of tangible and intangible creations of communities over generations. Now look at this. You are transcending time and generations, which is very important to include benefit sharing arrangements. What's the next step? That we were believing some time ago that whatever exists on Earth or in the universe belongs to everybody. Well, things changed. Again in the 80s, early 90s, I'll show you that. When national ownership of biodiversity, the concept came in. Sorry, if the biodiversity is in my country, it will belong to us. It will belong to India, or it will belong to Pakistan, it will belong to Bangladesh, etc. So the concept of biodiversity, which was available to everybody, it was owned by everybody or nobody, came in the concept of nationalization of biodiversity. And therefore this concept of national ownership of biodiversity, rights to flora, fauna, etc., came in and therefore followed a whole bunch of things. And therefore, now where are the issues? The issues are that you were trying to create a framework and expanding that old framework in its old formal way to accommodate more and more and more. So what happened? Because these issues among themselves were issues in the, if you take that one set and another set, the moment you create interfaces between these sets, everybody knows that when there is an interface between, let's say, water and air, you have a surface tension. You create a surface tension. And these sort of tensions have now got created between these interfaces. That's because we're trying to expand into these particular folders. So therefore, this issue of biodiversity, ownership, utilization, exploitation. Now I'm differentiating between the two words, utilization and exploitation. Okay? Out there, the two distinct words out there. Traditional knowledge, etc., become very key. And therefore, came in today's world, we have a large number of frameworks. These are different type of systems that we have. You know, this trademark, patent, copyright, etc., protection of new plant varieties, geographic indications, and all these are different, what I would say, tools of intellectual property rights